Two groups of humans are standing 50 meters apart. Neither one has ever seen the other before. Neither one knows if the strangers across the clearing are carrying weapons, carrying disease, or carrying nothing but curiosity. There is no language between them. No shared history. No way to ask a question and trust the answer. Every single thing that happens in the next 60 seconds will be decided by instinct alone. And somehow, this exact scenario played out successfully enough times that you exist. Your ancestors survived this moment. Every single one of them. Let's talk about what actually happens in that 60 seconds. Not the movie version, not the campfire story version where strangers are always either saviors or savages. The real version, reconstructed from anthropology, primatology, and the rare documented cases where modern researchers have witnessed first contact between isolated human groups. The first thing that happens is almost never a weapon being raised. It's stillness. Both groups stop moving. Completely. This is not a tactical decision anyone consciously makes. It is an ancient, automatic response shared with almost every social primate on Earth. When an unknown individual or group enters your field of vision, the nervous system's first instruction is not fight or flight. It's freeze. Gather information, don't commit to anything yet. In 1971, when researchers made contact with a small group of people in the Philippines who had reportedly lived isolated for generations, observers noted exactly this. Before anything else happened, before gifts were exchanged, before a single word was understood, both groups simply stood and looked. For minutes, just watching, calculating. This stillness has a name in behavioral science. Anthropologists call it the assessment phase. And it follows an extraordinarily consistent pattern across every documented first encounter, regardless of continent, climate, or culture. Step 1. Distance is established. Researchers studying both historical accounts and modern uncontacted group encounters have found a strikingly consistent buffer zone, somewhere between 30 and 100 meters, where approaching groups instinctively stop, close enough to observe detail, far enough to retreat or react if needed. Nobody teaches this distance. It appears to be calculated by the nervous system in real time, weighing visibility, terrain, and the size of each group. Step 2. Hands are shown. Across cultures with zero historical contact, a recurring gesture appears in first encounter accounts. Open palms, raised and visible. Empty hands are the single most universal signal in human history. It says simply, I am not holding anything that can hurt you. This gesture predates language. It may predate modern humans entirely. Chimpanzees and bonobos display similar open palm gestures during tense first encounters within their own social groups. Step 3. Someone breaks the stillness. Almost always, it is not the largest or most physically imposing member of either group. Anthropological accounts repeatedly describe a specific kind of individual stepping forward first, someone slightly removed from the center of their group's hierarchy, often older, often moving slowly and deliberately, often appearing deliberately unthreatening. This is not weakness. It is calculated vulnerability. A person whose loss would be tolerable signals that the approach is not a trap. What happens next determines everything. And this is where the story gets more interesting than fight or flight ever suggested. Genetic evidence tells us something remarkable about how these encounters often ended. Modern humans and Neanderthals were, for tens of thousands of years, two distinct lineages occupying overlapping territory across Europe and Asia. And the genetic record shows interbreeding occurred, not once, but in multiple separate waves across deep history. That means, on multiple separate occasions, two different human species stood across from each other in a clearing somewhere, assessed the threat, and chose proximity instead of violence. Repeatedly, across thousands of years and an unknown number of individual encounters we will never have direct evidence of. This doesn't mean violence never happened. It absolutely did. Skeletal evidence from numerous prehistoric sites shows clear signs of intergroup conflict, arrow wounds, blunt trauma, mass graves from coordinated attacks. Violence was a real and recorded outcome of human contact. But here is the statistic almost nobody discusses. Across the documented archaeological and anthropological record, violent first encounters appear to be the less common outcome, not the more common one. The majority of evidence, burial sites with mixed group remains, trade goods found hundreds of kilometers from their origin, genetic markers showing repeated intermixing between distinct populations, points toward cooperation, trade, and eventual integration as the more frequent ending to that tense, 60-second standoff. Why would that be true when violence seems like the simpler, faster solution? Because violence is expensive. In small hunter-gatherer populations, often numbering in the dozens, rarely more than a few hundred, losing even 2 or 3 able-bodied adults in a fight could be catastrophic for a group's long-term survival. Every individual represented irreplaceable knowledge, skill, and reproductive potential. The math of small populations made conflict a last resort, not a first instinct. In the vast majority of cases where alternatives existed, trade offered something far more valuable than victory: redundancy. A neighboring group with different territory meant access to different resources, different mates outside your own gene pool, different knowledge about terrain, weather, and danger you had never encountered. An enemy you eliminated gave you nothing further. An ally you cultivated gave you everything, indefinitely. So the assessment phase wasn't really about deciding whether to fight. It was about deciding whether the other group represented a threat too large to risk approaching or an opportunity too valuable to ignore. There's a specific detail in the anthropological record that captures this better than any statistic. In multiple documented first contact scenarios across different continents and centuries, one particular object recurs again and again as the first thing exchanged between strangers: food, not weapons surrendered, not formal treaties. Food offered directly, hand to hand, often before a single word was successfully translated. Sharing food carries an unmistakable, pre-linguistic message that nearly every human nervous system seems to recognize instantly. I have enough to give some away, and I am choosing to give it to you. It is simultaneously a display of resource security and an act of vulnerability. Once the food changes hands, you cannot take it back, and the other group now owes you nothing in return except whatever trust the gesture earns. This single act, strangers eating together for the first time, appears to be one of the most consistent de-escalation rituals in the entire archaeological and anthropological record. It worked tens of thousands of years before anyone invented diplomacy as a formal concept. It still works today. It is, in a very real sense, the oldest peace treaty humans ever signed, and it required no language, no shared culture, and no prior trust, just two empty hands and something offered freely from one to the other. You will probably never stand 50 meters from a group of humans who have never seen another person before. That specific scenario is almost extinct now, swallowed by a connected world where nearly every human group has, at minimum, indirect contact with every other. But the assessment phase never disappeared. It just got smaller, faster, and far less dramatic. Every time you meet someone new, a stranger at a party, an unfamiliar face in an elevator, a new coworker on their first day, some quieter, faster version of that ancient 60-second standoff still runs in the background. The stillness, the scan for threat, the search for some small, open-handed gesture that says, "I am not here to harm you." You are still doing the assessment phase. You just don't call it that anymore. And somewhere in the calculation your nervous system makes in the first 3 seconds of meeting a stranger, an instinct 300,000 years old is still quietly asking the same two questions it has always asked. Is this a threat? Or is this an opportunity I have not yet recognized? Your ancestors answered that question correctly often enough, across thousands of encounters with people who looked nothing like them, spoke nothing like them, and shared no history with them at all. Often enough that an entire species made it all the way to you,